I come with no other agenda than desperately trying to help people who are in need. And I see that as part of my role, is that why else would I be here if I'm not using this role properly to influence and help people where I can.
One quiet Sunday morning at St. Mary's Church, a 5-year-old girl sat by herself holding an old picture book. The air was still and sunlight made colorful patterns on the floor. Prince William, dressed simply, saw her and walked over. What he did next brought tears to everyone watching. Join us to uncover the truth about Rosie and the moment that left even a prince overwhelmed with emotion, stained glass, and silent resilience. It was a super quiet Sunday morning, and St. Mary's Church looked like something straight out of a storybook. The old stone walls were covered in ivy, and the early sunlight made everything seem calm and magical. Inside, beams of light poured through colorful stained glass windows, painting the cold stone floor with little rainbows. The air smelled like fresh flowers and old wood, and people shuffled in quietly, taking their spots for the morning service. Everything about the place screamed peace and reflection. But then, just as the first note of the organ hummed through the air, an unexpected noise from the bell tower broke the calm. It was subtle at first, like a faint rustling, but enough to make a few people glance upward curiously. In the middle of all this peacefulness was Prince William. Yep, that Prince William. But he wasn't making some big royal entrance with cameras flashing or people bowing. Nope. He was wearing a simple navy suit, trying to blend in like any regular guy. Of course, being a prince, he couldn't totally pull off just another guy at church, but he gave it a good shot. It seemed like he was there not for show, but for some rare quiet time away from the whole royal circus. As the service was about to kick off, something, or should I say someone, totally grabbed William's attention. Up near the front of the church, there was this little girl, probably about 5 years old. She was just sitting there all alone, which was kind of odd. Her curly brown hair made this adorable little halo around her small face, and her tiny feet didn't even touch the floor. They just swung back and forth like she didn't have a care in the world. In her lap was this old picture book, the kind that looked like it had been through some serious adventures. She was flipping through the pages super slowly, totally wrapped up in whatever story was in there, like the rest of the world didn't even exist. At first, William figured, oh, her parents must be running late, or maybe they're already sitting somewhere else. And he didn't think much of it. But then the minutes started dragging by. The service began, people were singing hymns, and everything was running as usual, except for one thing: nobody came to sit next to her. Not her mom, dad, grandma, aunt, nobody. She was just there, alone. The hymns were beautiful, voices blending together like some kind of heavenly music, but William couldn't stop glancing at the little girl. She wasn't fidgeting or messing around like most kids would be at her age. Nope. Every now and then, she'd just look up at the stained glass windows, her big, curious eyes soaking in all the colors and shapes. It was like she was watching some kind of magical show only she could see. Honestly, it was a little mesmerizing. There she was, this tiny human in this massive church, calm as anything. William couldn't help but wonder what her story was. Why was she alone? Where were her parents? And how could a kid her age seem so peaceful, like she belonged there all on her own? When the service ended, people began filing out, chatting and stretching after sitting for so long. The little girl, though, didn't move. She just stayed there, flipping through her book like she had all the time in the world. Her calmness was almost otherworldly, and William felt like he couldn't leave without figuring out her story. So William walked over, his footsteps soft and careful on the cold stone floor. He stopped just in front of her and knelt down so he could look her in the eyes. He gave her one of those warm, friendly smiles he was known for, the kind that said, "Hey, it's okay, I'm a good guy." The little girl looked up at him, her big hazel eyes meeting his. She wasn't scared or shy, just curious, like she was trying to figure him out. There was something in her gaze, though, something deeper, like she'd felt and seen things most kids her age couldn't even imagine. In the softest, tiniest voice, she introduced herself as Rosie. Her words were barely above a whisper, but they carried so much weight. Then she told him why she was there. She came to talk to God about her dad. "He's in heaven," she said, her little voice steady, but tinged with something William couldn't quite place. That simple, honest explanation hit William like a ton of bricks. It was such a grown-up thing for such a small child to say. Here she was, this tiny little girl sitting all alone in a big, echoey church, dealing with something way too big for someone her age. She told him about her dad, a soldier who she said was brave and funny and her hero. She talked about how much she missed him, but there were no tears. Instead, she had this quiet strength about her, like she'd already made peace with some of it in a way that most adults couldn't even manage. She believed her dad was watching over her, keeping her safe. That's why she came to the church. It made her feel close to him. She wasn't there because someone told her to come or because it was what she was supposed to do. She was there because she wanted to be, because it was her way of staying connected to him. William just sat there for a moment, completely taken aback. This tiny little person with her old soul and her big heart had managed to say something that felt bigger than anything else in that big holy space. Two hearts, one loss. Listening to her, William couldn't help but think about his own loss. Losing his mom, Princess Diana, had left a hole in his heart that never really healed. He knew all too well what it felt like to wonder if the people you love are still out there somewhere, watching over you, rooting for you even though you can't see them. For a moment, it felt like he and Rosie weren't so different. They were just two people, connected by the same kind of sadness. But weirdly enough, that sadness wasn't just heavy, it had a strange kind of strength to it too, like it helped you keep going. But William didn't make a big fuss or turn it into some deep speech. He just let her talk. Rosie went on about her dad, sharing all these little stories about how funny he was and the things he'd do that made her laugh. Her voice lit up when she talked about him, like he wasn't gone but just somewhere nearby. William didn't interrupt or try to fix things. He just listened, giving her his full attention like nothing else in the world mattered at that moment. What struck him the most was how brave she was. Even though she was so little, Rosie had this way of talking about her dad that was full of love and a kind of wisdom beyond her years. She wasn't bitter or broken. She was holding on to the good memories, and you could see it gave her a kind of quiet strength, the kind most grown-ups spend their whole lives trying to figure out. William felt a deep shift inside him as he listened to Rosie's quiet words. Her courage, her ability to find light and hope in something so heavy and heartbreaking, stirred something profound within him. He had faced loss before, but seeing such strength in someone so small moved him in ways he hadn't expected. He knew he couldn't fix her pain, but he wanted to offer her something, a small gesture to let her know she wasn't alone, that someone understood and cared. Reaching into his pocket, his fingers brushed against a familiar shape. He pulled out a small silver coin, its surface worn smooth from years of being carried. This wasn't just any coin, it was special, one he had kept close for a long time. On one side was an image of St. George slaying the dragon, a powerful symbol of bravery and protection. It had been with William through countless moments of uncertainty, almost like a good luck charm, and now it seemed only right to pass it on to someone who embodied courage far beyond her years. He knelt down again, holding the coin out to Rosie with a soft, steady hand. The gesture was simple, but the meaning behind it carried the weight of his empathy and understanding. For William, this wasn't just about giving her an object, it was about sharing a piece of hope and strength, something to remind her she was never truly alone. "This is for you," he said, his voice warm and gentle. "It's to remind you how brave you are, and to remind you that you're never really alone." Rosie took the coin, her little fingers curling around it like it was the most precious thing in the world. She looked up at him, her hazel eyes shining with something between gratitude and awe. William felt a lump in his throat as she whispered a quiet, "Thank you," her voice as soft and steady as ever. For a moment, the big echoing church felt smaller, cozier, like it was just the two of them sharing something that didn't need words. In that moment, William realized something. Sometimes it's not about fixing the sadness or making it go away. Sometimes it's just about being there, listening and showing up for someone who needs it. That simple, small gesture changed everything. Rosie's face lit up, her grief momentarily lifting like a heavy curtain pulled aside to let the sunlight in. Her smile wasn't just a smile, it was a little beacon of hope, bright enough to warm even William's soul. For her, the world suddenly felt a little less big, a little less scary. And for William, it was one of those moments that reminded him why compassion mattered so much. The story of their meeting didn't stay inside the walls of St. Mary's Church for long. It spread, first through whispers and then through stories shared over tea and breakfast tables. This wasn't just about a prince showing kindness. It was about two people, one a grieving little girl and the other a man who knew loss all too well, finding a connection in the middle of an ordinary morning. It became a story people shared to remind themselves that kindness still existed in the world. The coin that carried courage. For Rosie and her family, that day became a golden memory, something they held on to when things got tough. Rosie showed the coin to her mom later that afternoon, her little voice brimming with excitement as she told her all about the kind man who gave it to her. Her mom's eyes filled with tears as she held the coin, a mix of pride and gratitude swirling inside her. That little piece of silver wasn't just a trinket, it was a reminder that someone had seen her daughter, truly seen her, and offered a moment of comfort. For William, the memory of that morning stayed with him long after he left St. Mary's. He'd been moved in ways he hadn't expected. Little Rosie, with her bravery and quiet strength, reminded him of himself as a child, grappling with the loss of his mother. He thought about all the times he'd wished for a moment of kindness, a small gesture to remind him that he wasn't alone. In Rosie, he saw both the fragility and the resilience that grief can create. As time passed, he found himself reflecting on the encounter more and more. It wasn't about grand gestures or world-changing acts. It was about the little things, a coin, a kind word, a moment of understanding. Those were the things that mattered, the things that could pull someone back from the edge of despair. William realized that sometimes the biggest impact came from the smallest acts of care. That morning at St. Mary's wasn't just another moment, it became a memory carved right into his heart. It was like a big wake-up call that reminded him of what really mattered. The world can be messy, chaotic, and downright unpredictable, but empathy, that thing where you actually care about someone else's feelings, was the most powerful weapon he had. And when Rosie held onto her coin, her tiny fingers wrapped tightly around its cold, smooth surface, it became so much more than just a piece of metal. It was hope. Not just for her, but for anyone lucky enough to hear her story. The story of Rosie and the prince didn't stay tucked away in that small church for long. It kind of had this magic about it, spreading from one person to another like wildfire. Pretty soon, people were talking about it everywhere. It popped up in conversations at coffee shops, during family dinners, and even on social media. You'd see someone post about it with captions like, "This is exactly what the world needs more of right now." And it wasn't just about a prince being nice or a little girl being brave. It was bigger than that. It was about the connection, the invisible thread that tied them together. And in a way, it tied everyone else to them too. It was like a nudge to remind people, hey, we're all human here. We all feel, we all hurt, and yeah, we all hope. That simple Sunday morning at St. Mary's turned into something way bigger than anyone expected. It became one of those rare moments that crossed over time and place, leaving a mark that couldn't be erased. It was like a giant, glowing sign of everything good about humanity. Kindness, love, resilience, all that stuff. Rosie's bravery, William's kindness, and that little silver coin, who knew a coin could mean so much, became symbols of hope. They were proof that even in the middle of life's hardest moments, there's always a little light somewhere if you're willing to look for it. And honestly, isn't that what everyone's searching for? A little hope, a little proof that we're all in this together? That story didn't just stick around because it was nice. It stuck because it mattered. It reminded people, no matter who they were, where they came from, or what they'd been through, that in a world that sometimes feels so disconnected, small acts of kindness and bravery can pull us back together. Rosie's coin wasn't just a keepsake. It became a beacon, shining a little brighter every time someone shared her story, reminding everyone that the human spirit, it's pretty amazing. For some, the story became a source of comfort during tough times. Parents who'd lost children held on to it, finding strength in the idea that small moments of kindness could still shine through the cracks of their heartbreak. Soldiers and their families felt a special connection, seeing Rosie's story as a reflection of their own sacrifices and struggles. And for others, it was simply a feel-good reminder that there was still good in the world, that even in the middle of all the noise, quiet acts of love could make a difference. As the tale grew, so did its meaning. It wasn't just about a prince giving a girl a coin or a girl finding courage in the face of grief. It became a symbol of the things that really mattered: kindness, empathy, and the strength to keep going, even when it felt impossible. People talked about how the small silver coin had come to mean so much more. It wasn't just a piece of metal anymore, it was a reminder that someone cared, that someone saw you, even when you felt invisible. That quiet Sunday morning at St. Mary's Church turned into something much bigger than anyone could have imagined. It was a moment that broke through the everyday noise, a rare instance where the world seemed to pause and pay attention to something simple and pure. For Rosie, it was a day she'd never forget, a moment where her grief didn't feel so heavy. The coin became her talisman, a little piece of light she carried with her wherever she went. For William, the story was a constant reminder of the power of small actions. It stuck with him, replaying in his mind during quiet moments when he'd reflect on his own life and losses. He often thought about Rosie's bravery and how it mirrored his own journey of learning to cope with the absence of someone he loved. It reminded him that sometimes the most important thing you can do is just be there for someone, to show up and let them know they're not alone. Would you have stopped for Rosie or walked away thinking someone else would help? Let us know your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story.